Welcome to another episode of Data Gurus. I'm so excited to invite my friends here. I'm glad I can call you my friends. Brett Townsend, who is the SVP of Strategy at Questor, and Tim Hoskins, who is the president of Questor. Welcome, you guys.
Thanks. Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
And we are eternally grateful that we can call you a friend as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And also,
And you gave me first billing over the president. I mean, geez, I'm already feeling great.
Well, remember, we don't care about that, Brett.
Sure.
We're not like that. You guys are also co-authors of a book that you just published, and that is called The Insights on the Brink. We're going to talk about that. We'll dive into it. But before we go into that, I think it'd be really helpful for the listeners to understand a little bit of your background. And so this time I'll reverse it. I'll ask Tim, can you give us a little bit of your background?
I started my career in the information security industry, marketing major in college, and fell into an opportunity to work for a startup straight out of college. I actually worked with them as an intern, and the information security industry is fascinating, fast-paced changes with all the threats that are out there. And then you combine it with the startup world, where you're not only raising money, but you're actually trying to go out and sell at the same time. It was a great experience. I oftentimes look back, and many of my mentors have said that that's where you actually got your MBA.
Yeah, for sure.
In the trenches.
Yep.
Joined Questor 13 years ago, led the sales and marketing efforts to really help put the company, which was this small, tiny little organization that everyone called the best kept secret in our industry, to help put us on the map, and was promoted to president after about 4 years, and have been doing that ever since.
That's a great story, because it's so nice to have people that come from different industries and then kind of look at things with fresh eyes. Brett, how about you?
This one's better, by the way, Sima. This industry is much better than the information.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I was at IBM. All right, Brett, go for it.
I actually started my career in radio and TV broadcasting. That was what my undergrad was, and enjoyed that. Did a lot of sports broadcasting. It was fun, but then I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this the rest of my life. So started to make my way, maneuver myself over to marketing, consumer insights. I was a marketing minor, and so it was just kind of work. So I actually started my career on the agency side. And then after about 7 years, went to started a 15-year corporate career, PepsiCo, Electrolux, and at Lowe's. And then I was a client of Questor's for about 12 years, going back to my early days at PepsiCo. Tim and I had become really good friends over the years. It talked a lot about, if I ever got tired of corporate, then maybe we ought to work together. But a couple of years ago, we made that happen. So I'm going on almost 2 years at Questor now.
That's so cool. And so you probably got to know Tim when he joined Questor early on.
It was early on. Yeah. And he wasn't president yet. He was, he was our client service rep for PepsiCo. Kind of went from there. So yeah, it's been fun to see how he's grown and taken Questor from where it was when I first met him to where we are now.
So again, diverse background, and that brings me to the book that you guys wrote. First of all, I'm in awe of anybody who takes the time to sit down and write a book. It's like something that I want to do. I don't know if I'll ever do it, but so congratulations on that. Number one.
Thanks.
Number two, I'm just curious, Brett, like, what inspired both of you to write this book?
Tim actually inspired me because he asked me to give a keynote address in 2019 about some of these thoughts that he and I had been talking about kind of what's going on in our industry, or what are some things that are holding us back. And so that keynote address addressed just 3 things. And then from there, got a lot of really good feedback about, hey, you ought to blow this out some more and develop this a little bit more, and you could turn it into something. And so then Tim and I just had talked, and I had, developed what I felt was a pretty good outline, and then said, hey, Tim, let's talk about this. And, really just having it be a passion project for us, a labor of love. And just really, we're both, we aren't retired people that are cranky and talking about what's wrong out in an industry after we've left. We're working practitioners.
Yes.
We are in the thick of it. And just things that we've seen over the years about just the potential that we have, but yet how marginalized a lot of insights
Yep.
departments have become within companies because of some of the things that we talk about in this book about how we feel things are holding us back and keeping us from really exerting the kind of influence and having the type of real impact that we should be having.
And Tim, I know for you, and we talk all the time, like, why can't we do this? It's not, no, we can't do this, but why can't we make this change? What prevents us from doing that? What do you think some of the biggest challenges have been in our industry that prevent us? I shouldn't say prevent us, that slow us down, that weigh us down in terms of being adaptable to what we're seeing in the corporate world.
Um, there are a lot of different things,
Yeah.
but I was thinking about this a little bit more deeply. We are an industry of brilliant, creative, but humble people.
Yes.
And
So true.
and there's nothing wrong with that. But I liken it to an example when if you go on LinkedIn and somebody and you're going and scrolling through the news feed and you look at a campaign that was just launched.
Mhm.
The marketing team is screaming at the rooftops. Look at what we just
So
did.
true. Yep.
Right? Congratulations.
Uh-huh.
Right? They celebrate those wins and they do it in a way, it's still humble, but
Mhm.
it's also very proud
Mhm.
and loud. Same for innovation. When you see a new product launch that absolutely kills it, you see that same news in you know magazines and the Wall Street Journal and on LinkedIn as well. But never, rarely do you see the fact that it was built oftentimes on a amazing, empathetic, deep insight
Mhm.
that became the catalyst for that success. And if you scroll through your LinkedIn newsfeed, I would ask that do we as an industry boast and celebrate those catalyst opportunities or
Yeah.
moments? And so I think that that is one of the things that's getting in our way
Yeah.
is that we have been a behind the scenes industry. We have been one that celebrates our wins, but it's really around the water cooler
Mhm.
or within our walls. We don't shout it off on the
Right.
mountaintop. So I think that that is probably the biggest barrier and one that we have to actually get over and take not just more pride,
Right.
be a little bit more aggressive in our wins and take credit for them.
That I completely agree with you, and in the book you guys talk about this, is that the initial kind of thesis of where research was founded is it's academia and it's social sciences, and the roots of research really came from that kind of genre of research. Do you believe that, and I'll ask Brett this question. Do you believe that that is still kind of part of the legacy of why we are the way we are in terms of insights?
Oh, I absolutely do. Because if you look at what we're doing, we're still doing methodologies that were developed in the 30s and 40s by those clinicians and
Right.
academics. And it was developed in a very different atmosphere
Mhm.
where it was more about proving that the methodology was viable rather than solving business problems. These forefathers did work for businesses or companies and weren't responsible for creating profit or sales
Right.
with their insights. And so we're still holding on to some of to that methodology or that dog
Right.
of the repetition of those things. And that's not a bad thing against academia. I mean, we need
Sure.
to continue to stay connected with them, but just kind of go down two different paths. But we have to realize that we're in a very different business climate than where this industry was developed, and we have to evolve to better meet the needs that our internal constituents or that our clients or that our companies have.
Yeah. And
And,
go ahead.
and see, but to build on that, I mean, you know, methodologies aside,
Mhm.
right, the history of the industry itself was to present data.
Mhm.
It was to present insight. It the difference in my opinion is that we have to move beyond presenting data
Mhm.
and presenting insights, and we need to drive strategy and activation. I think that that is the biggest thing that it, is going to take us into
Yeah.
this new world. I was talking to a a chief growth officer not too long ago, and then the week after I talked to a CMO,
Mhm.
and we were just talking about data. We were talking about insight. We were talking about their businesses, and one of the things that they said is that we have so much data, we have so many insights from various different methodologies. What
Yep.
I need is somebody to tell us confidently and creatively, what should we go and do about it? And
Mhm.
what is that going to do for the business? And that is something that not, there are some organizations, to be fair, right? There are some
Yes.
organizations that are doing this really, really well, right? There are some agencies and consumer insights departments that are partnering on and doing this very, very well. But I would not say that it's the mass majority
Mhm.
of our industry collectively, agency and client side, right? A lot of people are still stopping at the data,
Yep.
stopping at the insight, stopping at the report.
And I can understand that, right? That's probably as far as they've been trained. So it's not a criticism. The question then becomes, how do we move up the value chain if that's the way the business is going? If that's like the thesis of the business and saying we have to provide more high-end consultative kind of insights that drive decisions, right? How do we do that, Brett? What's the kind of your thought process? Because I'll just add, fundamentally, it does change your business model, right? You focus now more on the talent that can actually create those stories and narratives, and obviously, since all these tools are in place, the time to create, actually collect the data, that game is changing, right? We spend less time there. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole chapter that we dedicate to how we should be finding talent and who
Yeah.
we should be going after. And it's not the traditional way that we feel like it is. But yeah, it- it's we had this when I was at PepsiCo, we had this thing where we would always say, us and Coke, we all have the same data.
Yeah.
We all
Yeah.
subscribe to Nielsen or IRI or whatever.
Yep.
We're all get the same POS data. We're all getting the same panel data. Like everybody has the same data. The
Right.
magic is what you do with it. How do you bring it to
So
life?
true.
How do you really do this? And it kind of creates this mind shift.
Mhm.
It was, I'm such a movie guy. And after we finished the book, I thought of this really great quote that I could have put in there, but I didn't, but I'm going to use it here. It's like in Shawshank Redemption when Red is talking about the prison walls. And he
Yes.
says, these walls are funny. First, you hate them, then you grow used to them, then you come to depend on them. And I think that's what's happened with methodologies or kind
Mhm.
of with these old ways of doing things. It's like we've just grown to depend on them as if that is our job.
Right.
And as Tim was saying, it really is there has to be a mind shift within the industry.
Mhm.
So many times Tim and I hear people blaming senior executives or coworkers for not
Mhm.
catching the vision of what insights is. And I'm like, well, have you shared the vision?
Right.
Have you shown them the vision?
Yeah.
Or have you just shown them data and methodology and these other things that we've
Mhm.
talked about? So it really is going to come down to as an industry, are we willing to have those types
Mm.
of conversations? And there's not one way to do it. And I think one of the big motivations for Tim and I to write this book was to spark conversation.
Mhm.
And we threw our opinions in there, and there are things that we obviously feel strongly need to happen, but it's really about what do we need as an industry need to do to evolve this way of thinking? And that's where it starts.
So, you have a chapter here dedicated to how we understand the missing link. It's emotion, right? Data in cross-tabular format in whatever PowerPoint slides. Um, there's a part of the storytelling and narrative that links the emotion of the consumer as you present the insights. Tim, I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about what does that truly mean for a researcher actually executing on big strategic, weighty segmentation projects, let's say?
Yeah. I think it starts with the culture at the organization, e
Okay.
even at the on the agency side
Yeah.
too. And we talk about and we read in various different publications about consumer centricity, right?
Yes.
Empathy, right? All of these buzzwords.
Yeah.
But do people truly believe it?
Mhm.
Do people truly believe it? And the first thing that you have to do is that you have to educate and essentially persuade your colleagues to not look at data and try to dispute it,
Mm.
right? But to look at data, to look at insight, to look at consumer and try
Mm.
to empathize with the challenges, the pain points, and the struggles and the progress that they're trying to make in their lives. We can't fundamentally do our job unless most or the majority of the people in our room have that empathy.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
that's why one of the reasons why I love Rob's book around empathy.
Yes.
It
Yes.
is brilliant, right? That's
Yeah.
the first organizational change. Because
Mhm.
if you can put in any creative methodology that you want, you can get to the deepest emotion with various different methodologies, and you can put that into your story,
Mhm.
but it won't break down the wall and get through to people unless they've already come to accept that belief internally as an organization. So that's why we have a chapter at the top
Mhm.
or at the very back that talks
Yeah.
about what can executives do to help within this journey. They can't just expect that consumer insights is going to do all of these things and everything's going to get better, right? It
Right.
actually starts from the top, from a cultural perspective, to be empathetic to colleagues, to consumer, to just people, humanity.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the first step. When it comes to presenting results, when it comes to those meetings, there are often times where I believe we have to lead with
Mhm.
emotion. Emotion drives decision making.
Mhm.
Emotion drove Brett and I to write this book, even though we knew that there are going to be some people within the industry that are not going to love it, are not going to
Yeah.
agree with everything that we've written. And that's okay because we wanted to spark
The conversation.
conversation.
Yeah.
And
I
so, you know, empathy is one of those very, very fun things that you should lead with. You should absolutely try to take advantage of it.
Mhm.
And in our opinion, it really isn't a good product, and it's not going to drive the bottom line or the top line of an organization unless you include emotion and empathy.
It's interesting because everything that we're talking about is it takes time, right? To really, like, cogitate in the data and, like, reflect and kind of put perspective to it takes time in a world where people can't get data or insights fast enough. And so, Brett, I'm curious, how do you balance that force of nature of, like, quicker, faster to then, like, let's slow down and really understand what this data are telling us?
Oof, yeah, that's the tricky
That's the tricky part.
that's the tricky part. I think the first of all is the realization that it doesn't have to be 100% correct. We're never
Yeah,
going to achieve a level of I am 100% sure of everything.
right.
Um, we it's 80% will get us there. And there have
Yep,
been a lot of times where I've been in meetings where we are telling the story, we're doing all of the right things. And then the CMO and or the CEO will look at me and say, Brett, given what you know, are you comfortable with what you're recommending?
right,
I mean, talk about putting yourself on the spot, and then it's like, yes, I am, because they're acknowledging we don't know everything, but
right.
we know enough.
Mhm,
And that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I think it's understanding that. It's also understanding that it doesn't take as much time as people think. It takes a shift in how you work. And so it is, are we spending most of our time worrying about data and charts and
mhm,
graphs and doing different things? Or are we from the very beginning looking for stories and
right.
looking for those things that are understanding that. Like when we're putting together a good story, it's like, do we understand the consumer conflict here?
Mhm.
Because conflict is what drives every story and what makes it so compelling. And it's that consumer conflict that gives us the empathy to say, we have to go create a solution to help them
Right.
because we
Right.
know what's going on there. So really, I don't think it takes as much time as
Yeah.
everybody thinks it will, rather again, just a shift in the way that you work and
Yeah.
just working differently rather than working the same way that we always have.
Yeah, and also speaks to that partnership with the client, right? Because
Mhm.
the more you work with a specific client, the deeper you get into understanding what are their pain points, what are their problems, what's going to get them promoted, right? Um,
Well,
it
even
all,
on the corporate side,
yeah,
with your internal constituents, with
right,
the cross-functional partners that you have, setting those expectations and getting to know what they need
yes,
and not being reactive to things or wait to just take orders. It's like when you're proactive, you can set timetables and you can set parameters.
yeah.
You can really be in charge of how the right type of research should be done. And the,
I always refer to this notion of we need more drivers. We need more
Mm,
people leaning in and asking the more difficult questions and not it's being curious, but also not being afraid to be wrong or not know the answer, right? Otherwise, it's like you sit in these rooms and it's like nobody's talking and a pin's waiting to drop before somebody says, ask the tough question. You guys know what I'm talking about.
oh
Well,
yeah.
and there's like throughout a couple of different chapters,
Yeah.
there's also this overarching theme of like not being afraid to say no.
Yeah.
And, I can't tell you how many conversations that, again, being on the agency side and working across so many different clients where they will get on the phone
Mhm.
and they're like, okay, we think we need to do this. Right. And this is what we're trying to solve for and answer. And, you know, it's in our, like, probably a bad business person, right? But to come back and say, no,
Yeah.
like, I don't think that you really need to do more.
Right.
I think that you have the answers right there. And what we need to do is drive decision making, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, do you really need more research or do you really need to get people in the room and force them to activate based on what they know today?
Mm-hmm.
The historically, it's yeah, let's go and do it because that's what we like to do.
Right. Right.
Like to
Exactly.
get more information. We like to do those things. Whereas we have to also be able to switch our mindset to be able to say no, but here's what we can and should do.
Right. Right. It does.
it's a,
Go ahead, Brett.
Oh, I was gonna say, it just reminds me of a coworker I had at PepsiCo where we joined about 6 months apart from each other, and he came on and he got the early nickname of Doctor No because he would tell people no a lot when they would come to him for research, but he would always say, "Here's how it would be better. Here is a better way to do it. Here's how I think we should do it," and he was always right, and so.
That's cool.
And
Yeah.
was the thing about it. And I think in this climate of cutting budgets and cutting headcount and
Yeah.
companies laying off entire insights departments, is that I think a lot of people have become afraid to push
Yes.
back and afraid to say no. And they're just kind of surviving
Yeah.
and fighting for their jobs. And it's turned us into yes men and yes women where we're just kind of doing whatever our coworkers or higher ups are telling us to
Mhm.
do. And that is not helping.
Right.
Because what happens is that most people don't really know the right way to do things, but it's these insights amateurs within a company who think they know enough to be dangerous, and they are dangerous because they're not doing it the right way.
Right.
And then when it goes badly, almost all the time, who gets blamed? The insights people get blamed,
Yeah.
not the people who had the idea to do worthless focus groups or,
Yeah.
whatever else it is. And so I think we have to stand up for our own well-being, our own industry, our integrity. I mean, whatever you want to do
Right.
it, but we can't just keep taking orders.
It's a big cultural change.
It
It's
is.
it's massive.
Yeah.
And I listen. I want to ask Tim my last question because I'm sensitive to time here. If you were a actually, I'll ask you both one question. Tim, for you, on the agency side, if you're a researcher, what can a researcher do today to start their journey on this change?
I think on the agency side, you still have to deeply understand methodology analytics.
Okay.
In many ways, you know, on the agency side, you actually have to do two things in parallel, which doubles your work, doubles your
Right.
education and training. Because on the other side, what you have to do in parallel is deeply understand business
Mm-hmm.
and how businesses make decisions. You know, if I challenge everybody to understand how to read a P&L,
Yeah.
even
Mm-hmm.
understand how budgeting works.
Mm-hmm.
If you're focused on, let's say, innovation research, you have to understand how innovations move through the stage gate process
Yeah.
and even how a CFO asks people to build models to determine if an innovation moves forward or not,
Right.
right? Because the power that you have on the agency side, if you understand both of those
Mm-hmm.
elements, right? What you're proposing as recommendations, as activation and as strategy becomes so much more powerful
Mm-hmm.
and will the likelihood of it actually being accepted within the organization and moving forward increases exponentially. So it is double the work. There's
Yeah.
no doubt about it. But you have to be able to do both things in parallel
Yep.
because even though Brett and I are talking in the book about like, oh, we don't need to focus on methodology and all those other things,
Right.
you still do.
Yeah.
Right? You absolutely still need to have a deep knowledge of them to determine which one should be applicable. That
Right.
is our job on the agency side
Right.
to do.
That's table stakes, right? Yeah.
But I think
Uh,
that's the key, Seema.
yeah.
It's table stakes. It's
Right.
not the definition of our job.
Right. Brett, you alluded to it before, but I just want to be more like just put a bow on it. If
Yeah.
you're on the client side, what's the one thing you would recommend a client side insights professional to do to move on this journey?
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm laughing because the first thought that came to my mind was read this book. It
There
sounds
you go. That's great.
it sounds very self-serving. Here's why I say this is because you like did a little snort laugh there.
That's
Because we wrote this book not to be philosophical. We wrote this book to be very practical and that anyone at any level of their insights career could read this and come away with things that they could start to do immediately that can make things better, that they can do their jobs better. And so there's a number of things that we could talk about.
right.
But it really, I think, is just realizing. So if I had to just answer one thing, it's
Mhm.
realizing you exist at a company to make it money, period.
Yes. Yep.
We ask people all the time, what's the role of consumer insights? And we get every answer except make money.
Right.
And that's the only reason why we exist. Companies don't hire us to do research. They hire us because they think that the consumer research we do is going to make the company money, but we lose sight of that. We do worthless projects or
Right.
interesting projects that don't
Yes.
really lead anywhere. And so I think if I were to say one thing other than read the book, because there's so many things in there, it's just change the mindset and you are there to make the company money. And so whatever it takes to do that, question every study you do, question the
Right.
motives, question everything about, is this going to lead to sales? If the answer is
Mhm.
yes, do it. If the answer is no, then either don't do it or modify it where it will.
Good advice. Having said that, where can somebody buy the book to start their journey?
It's real easy. Just look up Insights on the Brink on Amazon and
All
it's
right.
there. Yeah, you
Good.
can get it ebook or paperback.
You guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. And congrats on the book again. And I recommend reading it. You guys sent me an early manuscript and it's an easy read too. It doesn't take a long time to go through it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sima.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.